Hello, it's Dawn Michelle, and today I have company. And today joining me is my beautiful friend Rumer from Rumer Haven.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's such an honor.
So before we get into all the creative stuff, Rumer, you want to tell us a little bit about your channel?
My channel is kind of a weird little hybrid. I've been doing tarot tube for the last year or so, but I actually originally created it to promote books that I was more actively writing and publishing at the time. And I've had a bit of a hiatus in the more recent years and found that tarot was really overtaking my fancies, and I was finding myself wanting to talk more about that. But I still do talk about writing from time to time, though, because it does tie in with my tarot practice in some ways. So I'm able to talk about both.
And you've been doing recently, you've been doing the moon spreads. I just watched an intention one, which was really cool.
Thank you. I had not done intention setting in a while.
Yeah, I have, which reminded me that I probably should. So are you doing that in alignment with your writing stuff, or just because I know you mentioned motivation in the video? Was that related to your writing stuff?
Yes, absolutely. I've got a crystal grid just over my shoulder here with the intention of firing up my creativity and motivation. And, you know, I'm obviously the one that has to like do the work.
Right, yeah.
But I just find that having something visible and in my workspace, it just helps to reinforce that I did set that intention for myself. And it gives me something to kind of meditate over and just that little nudge if I find that I haven't really been consciously doing anything for it.
You use the crystal grid. I'm trying to remember. I mean, I just watched it this morning, so like it's pretty fresh in my brain. So you used the crystal grid. You had your Lenormand, your tarot cards, and your little elemental box with some geomancy stuff. Was that?
Yes. And runes as well. Yeah.
You mentioned picking up from Kelly the Truth and Story. I think we've all picked up a lot of stuff from her.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The 9-card spread.
To me, and I was like, no. I didn't do that. I adopted it and then made it my own. But
well, I think that's what's beautiful is that we can inspire each other like that. And I think personalizing it is what really enhances it, because that's what I did. I totally ripped off Kelly's idea for that one intention setting method, but then incorporated some elements of my own that made it like resonate more with me and kind of built in like the ritual of it that I sit with. And again, it's all with that purpose of like reinforcing that intention and just, trying to light the fire under myself, because I have been on a hiatus with the writing because I was prioritizing the editing for a time, because I also will edit fiction and some nonfiction, and that's the work that actually pays me. And so I just backburnered my own stuff for a time, and that is a creative outlet to be helping others with their stories. So, you know, after doing that all day, I'm kind of tapped out for my own stuff. So I'm trying to reemerge from my little cocoon this year and see if, you know, some old story ideas I have still have anything to them, and if I can get motivated about it. But so it's just little rituals like that just kind of help me live more with intention, I guess. Get a bit more serious about it. And like I said, it's like that little visual nudge that just reminds me to even give a few minutes a day over to it.
Intention's huge. It's like it's a huge part of, I think, and I mentioned this, I think, in the video with Lisa about the practice. Like there were times like back in the day where I did a lot of stuff without intention, and like coming at creative projects and stuff like that. Sometimes I find myself, I'll do that too. Like I'll just be like, oh, I need to work on this. So I'll work on this, but like, it's not really there. Like the intention's not really there. The connection's not really there. I love the idea of having an intention ritual around your creative work though. I think that's probably serves as a good visual reminder when you're not in that space that, oh yeah, that's important to you, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, it really does. Because honestly, out of sight, out of mind, and it's easy for me to do all the other things that I do to procrastinate. And so it's just, yeah, I have found it helpful in the past, and I don't know why I haven't done it in a while.
Mhm.
So, but it's been effective for me, and like I said, it's aside from just being able to see it, I could just sort of like hover over it, if you will, and just recite that intention over and over again, and make
Mhm.
it a meditation practice as well that I can do daily. And that can just kind of get me in the headspace of where I
Mhm.
want to go as well.
That's
So,
such a great idea because it's like breathing it in on a daily basis.
yeah,
So, like,
yeah.
you're doing creative work even when you're not doing creative work because, like, meditation, creating crystal grids, creating a ritual, creating an intention like that, that's creative too.
It is.
So I think sometimes we tend to focus like creative. I know I do. Like creative is like output stuff, but
Yeah.
it doesn't always have to be. Like it can
Yeah.
be input stuff too. That can be creative too.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Because as I was explaining in that video, with those little rituals, it's like everything that feeds into it is chosen with intention. So it's like a whole process of just thinking through, first of all, what the intention is going to be, but then selecting. Like, so for crystal grid, like, well, what crystals do I think would be
Mhm.
appropriate? Which ones, from my understanding of them, hold those energies, and how could
Right.
I arrange that? And I mean, that's something like there's so many different iterations that you could do towards the same intention, but
Mhm.
and it's not like I've set up the same one. I've done it for creative work before, but this is a different grid than what I've done before because I don't know. Sometimes there's just a little nuance to it. Like this time around, it's really important to me that what I'm creating is coming from the heart. It's
Mhm.
something I want to do, you know, and it's like giving joy and it's authentic to me. And so that just impacted how I phrased the intention, but also crystals that I chose for it. And because it's not like you said before, sometimes like it's not enough just the output and the doing
Yeah.
it, because there is that thing like, well, just write for a few minutes a day, just have a word count goal and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And it's true, like the more I do it, it begets doing more of it, but at the same time, it's also it can feel really mechanical and
Yeah.
stale when I do that too. And I just have days where I'm like, it's
Mhm.
just it's not flowing,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's not enough to just push through with the word count to get it to flow. Sometimes I do need to step back and kind of meditate on it.
Mhm.
Maybe not reciting the mantra of my intention, but actually like get in a meditation space about my characters
Yeah.
and the story and where I think it could go, and just kind of like let go of that pressure of word count and
Mhm.
page count, and actually immerse in the story. I actually did a workshop, was that last year? I judged for this literary festival for a short story contest, and I actually have
Mhm.
a video that is at my channel that I had to do because the festival was remote given
Mhm.
COVID.
Right.
Um, but I did a little workshop on meditating, like doing a visualization exercise, basically for
Cool.
working on adding all of the senses into your writing, like appealing to all five senses, but actually like taking time to close your eyes and breathe through it and just visualize that space and walk through it. And I don't know. People
That's
always think to go to methods like that for their
Mhm.
writing, like you think you have to be sitting at the computer, but
Mhm.
I get so many ideas jogged loose
Mhm.
random times,
For
washing
sure.
my hair or
Yeah.
out for a walk.
Yeah. Do you remember that what was it that week? I don't even remember when it was, a couple months ago where I was like, I'm gonna sit and I'm gonna work on my fiction for like that whole week. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
What did I write? Like nothing. I think I worked on a tarot guidebook and I was like, okay. So like, and I bring that up because like intention, even though I had the intention to do that, I
Yeah.
didn't really have the intention to do that, obviously, because I didn't work on it at all. That whole
Yeah.
I think I ended up I don't
I
even
remember being jealous that you had at least written something, because I was also like, yeah, me too, me too. I'm just gonna give at least again 5 minutes a day, and I maybe did it a day or two, and then it was like, nah,
yeah,
not just
it was
something
like
else.
it didn't end up like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like it was a good idea. It's like setting a word count. It's like it sounds like a good idea for me, but like in practice, like
yeah,
there's that word again, but in practice, it doesn't actually work. So I'm not a
yeah,
person that can like set a word count and set that as like an intention. I need like more than that. It's gotta like you said, stem from the heart. And I think that's what I did that week. I was just like,
yes,
here's my intention. I'm going to work on, I don't even remember what I said. So it was a fiction thing. I was going to work on a fiction story. And then I sat down and I think I was frustrated all week long. And then I started a guidebook for a tarot deck that I'm not even making right now. And like, I was doing everything I could to like not work on the project that I had said I was going to work on, because clearly that intention. So I think there's a difference between intention when it comes to creative work and like just stating that you're going to do something. Those are two totally different things.
Oh, very much. Yeah. Because I deliberately went with a touchy-feely intention. And like, I know when it comes to intentions, like being specific is very helpful.
It is, yes.
But I kind of felt like I got to start a little broad on this. And then as, you know, if I feel like momentum building, then revisit it and I can refine my intention from there. So like, that's how I'm approaching this right now, because I just kind of need to get like my cylinders firing and first, before I get to a point where I'm like, I want this word count by this date. Yeah, I find that I don't tend to get that specific, because yeah, it is. Honestly, I do think that that's why it's so important to me to do it from the heart, because in your case, you did what you were being called to do at that time. You know, like you were probably thinking, oh, I should work on this, but like, your spirit was kind of like guiding you to these other projects, and that was probably the right time and when you were most inspired to do it and do like your best work on it. And so I feel like there's a lot to be said for that and going with the flow.
I'm very much just like, I go with the flow. In the minute, which is what happened that week where we were talking about, the minute I like tell myself I'm going to do something, like my inner teenager goes, no, we're not doing that. I want to, and you can't make me. And that is totally what happens.
Yeah.
Like, I've just learned, like, for me, I can't set rules like that for myself when it comes to my creative work. Like I can with like editing or making videos, or like I can have a publishing schedule and I can set, you know, goals and rules and all kinds of things, an entire framework around that. But when it comes to my creative projects, like writing or making art or whatever, the minute I start trying to put it in some sort of box, it just like there's an immediate disconnect where it's like, yeah, I don't know what else to call it other than my inner teenagers. Like, nope, I'm not doing it. You can't make me.
The petulant inner teen. Yeah. I like it. And I'm pretty sure I have one too.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it almost seems like opposing, right? To have rules in a box. Like for creativity, you need to be outside of the box and you need to like not be inhibited by the rules and just kind of like flow is really important with it. And so it's hard because it's like, I do get that there's a discipline required at some point to actually finish the thing. But I don't know, in feeling out like the beginnings of projects, or if it is really the right timing to be working on something, it's not to say like, if you shelve something, you're never going to do it again. It just, honestly, it just might not be the right time for some reason.
Yeah.
And something else calls. And so you can always go back to that. And I feel like that's what I have done by shelving my own work. You know, I've done a couple of long short stories in the last few years, but that's really the extent of it. And when I did work on those, it was a real slog getting going, but I did kind of push through, and then I was in the flow. And it just like all came from there, and was able to meet the deadlines I needed to on them. And those are both stories. The tarot got me through it because it was a slog getting started, and I was having a very hard time getting myself motivated. And
So how did you incorporate tarot into that process? Did you have certain readings or decks or anything like that you used?
I did. And I wish I could say I was creative enough to even think of the idea to use tarot for it to begin with, but no, it was my niece who said to me once when I was complaining about my writer's block. She's like, you should use tarot to write a story. It's like,
there's a whole book on that I read it was probably 15 or more years ago. It's like called, I don't even know if it's in print anymore. It's called Tarot for Writers. That was the first time I'd ever even come across the idea of using tarot in writing.
Yeah.
So it's like the story is in the tarot. Like, I don't know why it never occurred to me before, but yeah.
Right, exactly. And I never heard of that book, so now I'm taking note. Because it had never dawned on me either. And I was even at the time like, I mean, I've been studying tarot probably like a little over the past decade, but like I don't feel like I got like really serious about it and like actually developing a practice until maybe the last 5 or so years. And so that was around the time she had suggested it. So it was again where I'm like, you know, I'm still kind of learning it and figuring out how to incorporate it. And that was like just a light bulb moment. Her light bulb that I was so lucky to shine on me to encourage me to do that, because then it did become a go-to use for tarot too, to supplement all the other uses I have for it. But so the first story I decided to use it on, because again, I was kind of shelving this manuscript idea that what I'm working on now, backburnered. And I was asked to contribute to an anthology, and the anthology had a certain theme that everyone's stories needed to like intersect on. And so I was stuck. You know, I don't do well writing on command, and I was really freaked out having a deadline, because that is just not, I am not a prolific writer at all. I am the laziest writer ever. I'm not disciplined with it. And I was just like, oh crap. And so I thought, okay, this is the time to take my niece's advice. So one deck that I used, this had nothing to do with the theme of the anthology, but I knew no matter what, whatever the theme of anything that's given to me, I want it to be a ghost story typically. So I thought, oh, to get in the mood for a haunted story, I would use the Tarot of Haunted House, Sasha Graham. And I honestly feel like any of her decks would be so well suited to using tarot for creative work, especially writing, because her decks have a narrative themselves. There's this protagonist, it's the Strength card. I just love this.
That's so
and
cool.
Actually, this came up in a reading that I did for that story. And this deck is just so expressive, because it does follow this character Raven all the way through. So there's like that continuity in character and setting, and not that she's in all 78 cards, but the setting remains the same. And this is populated with all things paranormal. I mean, there's these ghoulish monsters beneath the bed. There's angels and demons. It's even a shout out to The Shining in one of the cards. But in any case, the fact that I could see the story in these cards already lent itself really well to that. And then honestly, I don't know how I first stumbled on it, because I actually didn't watch Ethany's channel at the time, but I somehow stumbled on her story spread, which I don't think she was sharing for the purpose of creative work. I think it was to enhance your reading of the tarot itself and finding the story that's within it. And when you do have a spread laid out in front of you, finding the narrative and kind of learning how you can connect the cards with each other and not just look at them in isolation for their spread position. Right. So, but it lent itself really well to what I used it for, because it related to character and what that character's conflict would be. And I've done a couple of videos on this also. Maybe I've done like 3, but the first 2 are called Creative Woo Writing, and I shared how I took the spread from Ethany, because again, I'm so creative. I took someone else's spread idea. But it did give me this idea of like, I mean, I had a sense already who my main character would be, but like it really helped me kind of unpack what the sense of conflict would be and what the outcome, like what the desired goal was and what the outcome would be. And it just sort of, again, these cards just being so, you just see the story playing out in them, that it just really helped me that much more easily see the story.
It's like her whole world. It's her little story. That deck surprised me when I first got it. I'd seen it around, but I didn't realize how intricate the story was and how involved it was in the development of the progression of the tarot in that particular deck. It was really cool. I haven't actually used it for any sort of writing stuff, but it's a really cool deck in that, looking at narrative.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you had shared, I remember, because it was a Dawn Made Me Do It deck, the Dark Grimoire
Oh yeah.
deck. I remember you sharing that on one of your videos and saying you were using that for, writing purposes. I don't know what it was specifically, but I remember soon after that getting that one too, because that also, like being based in these stories of H.P. Lovecraft, it just seems like if the artwork of a deck has like that sense of story in it. I mean, I guess any tarot deck has a story. We've got our Fool's Journey and everything, but something that's like specifically maybe literary, something storybook, something set in an enchanted forest, or just in the setting that you want to write. Like I was thinking of, if I was writing sci-fi, I would use Tarot of the Cat People, and sort of like choose a deck that corresponds with, the vibe of the story itself. And so, I just find decks like that lend itself well. And Sasha Graham, I don't have it anymore, but the Dark Wood Tarot also followed a protagonist, I believe, and sort of had that narrative running through. And I mean, a lot of decks do. I probably don't have the awareness of what else is out there, but I'm sure a couple of others that I have also do that. But I just think that it just lends itself to kind of getting the idea to gel in the mind. But of course, it's not like it's like with any tarot reading. And this is something else I remember you saying once, how if you're getting advice from the tarot, you're not necessarily, you don't feel like committed to have to act on that.
Yeah.
Am I remembering that right?
But yeah,
like it's clear, but it's not like you're binding yourself to.
Yeah. In terms of like your writing and stuff like that, or just reading in general?
I think you were saying it just with reading in general, but I definitely think in terms of writing, like you still leave yourself the wiggle room where you're not too reliant on the cards.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell the story for you, because you do still have to have your own creativity there. It's more so, I think, going in with some ideas already, it just more so helps structure and gel them rather than just be like, oh, I had no idea that my character would be like that. You know what I mean? I don't think there's anything like that. Or where I was like, oh, I was thinking I was taking the story in this direction, but I don't know, this card is saying this. I look at it more in terms of like the context of what ideas I already have.
Yeah. But I think it's possibilities. It doesn't mean you should absolutely like, it's like when you do a daily card pull and you pull a tower. Okay, that does not mean that your whole entire world is going to become crashing down on you today, right? And I think that is probably in relation to something like that, because I hear that a lot in terms of daily draw stuff. Like what do you do when you get a bad card, and then you start looking for it, and then in my experience you start manifesting that.
God.
You're constantly looking for it, you're going to manifest it.
Completely. It's just that thing, because I am just very visual. So it just helps me to see like an expressive image or a few, kind of jog the ideas loose. And I have my little, this is like the latest journal that I work with, but I mean, just to show like the chicken scratchings when I've done, pages might look something like this when I'm sitting. This was me doing that story spread for a secondary character. And it's just like, I will look, but again, because I already have some preconceived ideas for these characters and what the plot's going to be, but I just look at that image and I just see what it kind of ignites to elaborate on that. And then it's like sitting with my journal and pen and paper. I always start with pen and paper really before I go to the computer, at least for mapping out these things. And then it's just kind of the free association too, jumping off of that card. And again, kind of seeing where it fits within like something I might have already been envisioning or further down the way. Like, so that's an example of like, I've used that specific spread as a jumping off point for like characterization and conflict and everything. But then like, I might pull a card or two down the line if I'm kind of like, if I've written myself maybe into a corner, maybe if it's time to decide, because, there are possibilities and might have ideas like, okay, it could go this way, it could go this way. It becomes this whole like decision tree. It could help with that, like just kind of knowing maybe what direction would best suit the story, or at least give food for thought. Because again, I'm not going to let the tarot make that decision.
Right. Yeah.
But I am going to be open to what it says, and I don't think it would steer me wrong. It hasn't. I never did pull a card where I was just like, well, I wasn't really thinking of that. I don't like it. No, I'm not going to go with that, or feeling beholden to it. I have like it always does seem to jibe with what I already have in mind. And there was another story I did where it had to be for another anthology. It had to be set in the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of like, well, crap, I'm not really excited about that decade. No offense to anyone who loves that decade. I was born in the 70s, but I just don't.
Same.
Yeah, like I've written historical fiction. It's like Victorian era, 1920s. Like I kind of go for that. And so yeah, the 70s, I was like, well, how am I supposed to get excited about this? And so one thing that got me excited, it finally got me to get the Morgan Greer. I got the one. Granted, this deck came out later than the year that my story had to be in. I had to have my story in 1972.
that deck is so 70s though. That like,
oh yeah, right. So I think this was like at the end of the decade, but it's still just very much captured like the vibe that I was looking for. And this was always a deck at the time that I was like wanting to get, but I don't know, never really felt the right excuse to. So I'm showing it as if like everyone hasn't seen this, but yeah, just like the vibrancy and like the people populating it, even though it's not like one following a narrative, you know, like a tarot, a haunted house or whatnot, or making any literary allusions, it's still, I find like really expressive. Like I did very readily see characters in these people and their mustaches.
I love their mustaches because like if I remember back in the day in my childhood, like my dad, my uncles, like everybody had that mustache, right? So every time I pull it out, it's like that's like nostalgia.
Nice. Yeah, honestly. It did. It just like it put me in a zone, and it's so vibrant and fun. It's such a fun deck to work with, and that it helped get me excited about this story. And so that is what helps me create from the heart, you know, if I can get excited about something. And so I started out, I did that same story spread for my main character and like secondary character, and they were in a relationship with each other. So after I had done that same spread for each of them, then I decided to do a relationship spread that I had, you know, seen elsewhere on the internet and had just used for like actual real life relationships. I was like, I'm going to do that for my characters. Again, I had an idea which just further it got gelled and further elaborated upon through doing the story spread with them. And then now having this clearer view of who they were and idea of what their conflict would be, I wanted to see how that would fall out in the relationship spread. So again, all the cards that came out, I mean, it all like dovetailed so well with anything that I did already have in mind, but it just added some nuance. It kind of gave me additional ideas that supported existing ones. And it was just really neat. And it really endeared me to the characters. Like, I love them so much. I love their love so much. And I think part of it was because of this spread, because I was really seeing them like I was doing a relationship spread for two actual people, and it just made them much more real in my imagination. And that story from that point really did just take off. And so that was just like another example of how I guess I let the story, those are the only two I've really done this fully for. So I've let the story dictate the deck that I use.
Which makes sense. Kind of get you in that world, in that realm. I'm going to have to try the relationship spread with my characters. You know, the ones that I talk about that I'm so in love with.
Yes. Oh,
now to try that. I haven't done a relationship reading for them. That would be fun. Because I haven't done a relationship reading in general in probably like, I don't know, 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, I had not done it commonly because I mean, I'm not a professional reader,
Yeah.
and so I guess I'd be doing it for myself.
Yeah, I don't
argument with my husband or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really do relationship readings anymore. I mean, I've been married for too long. Like there's no mystery anymore.
Well, that's kind of the thing. It's like, it was probably like a spread I learned early on in my tarot journey. And then it was just like, all right, I have it in my little journal of spreads and everything, but it wasn't anything. So it is so fun to use this way.
Yeah, I'm going to have to try that to see what comes out.
It lends some really great insights, I think.
Have you ever used that, or do you have that Kim Krantz Archetypes deck?
Yes, I do have that.
Have you used it for your creative work?
You know what? I haven't.
So
I want to.
I was talking to Christine Roselle, who's also a writer, and she recommended that deck to me, and I'm like, I've had that deck like 3 different times now, but I brought it back in because I modded it once, passed it on to a friend, modded it again, passed that one on, and then now I've got it, and I just left it alone this time because now I'm focusing on the more of the what's in the book. I mean, I pulled the cards around. Yeah. Because she had read one of my stories and like, here's the archetypes that you're currently working with, because like I'm not really a fiction writer. Like I play with that. So she was like, here, pull those 2 cards out and then read the book. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So now I'm working on like maybe expanding upon that. So I was just wondering if you had used that one at all for any sort of creative work.
I love that deck, and I never once thought of that. I love it though. I'm going to now.
Yeah, because
thank you, ladies, for that one. Yeah,
it was really interesting. I think she uses it quite often, and it's
that's brilliant.
It's really well geared to that. Like archetypes, really well geared toward that. But I'm just now starting to play with those ideas. I mean, my fiction that's my playground. Like it's not serious work. It's just I play.
It should be that. It should be that. Even if you end up doing something serious with it, like it's got to be. I think it's got to be fun.
Yeah, I think so too. It's like do you plot? I just have to ask. Do you plot your novels when you write stories?
Well,
I mean, we're teaching from tarot a little bit, but I'm fascinated with writers and their process. And do people plot or not?
Well, I'm gonna pull this notebook out again. This is one of a few notebooks that I have like this. It's just the current one on hand. Because, I learned the hard way. The first manuscript that I wrote, I did not plot, and it was a nightmare as a result. And it was, I eventually got around to tightening it up and getting it shaped and everything. And it's just one of those where it's like, oh gosh, at some point you just have to let it go, And so, there are things like if I approached that one, I would have approached it differently. But I feel like once I got in the second half of it, then I was getting more of a clear sense of like plot points and where I wanted to go, at least mentally. So the second attempt, I know that there are some writers and it works so well for them to like really meticulously outline. I can't do that. I know I can't do that. And so I don't plot to where I'm going to have like a multi-layered outline and it's going to be neat and bulleted. It is just more so very back of the envelope. And because again, like these notebooks are just like these chicken scratchings. I mean, I just kind of like get started and I just write, and I might like do rough bullet points to get a sense, but I feel like it's a hybrid of what I do. To like have that sense of like the overarching arc, of the story, and have that sense of like where you could have like the rising action and hit that climax and like the falling action that follows that. But I like things to happen organically along the way too, because I know we've talked about this before. We're always afraid people are going to think we're crazy because we hear our characters talking. They talk to us,
I have lots of things that talk to me. It's all good.
It's fine.
Fine.
We're all fine. It's a safe space for us.
Telling me to stop going around saying my aliens weren't talking to me anymore. When I was drawing my alien deck.
Yes.
And I was like, my aliens aren't talking to me anymore. He's like, babe, you gotta stop saying that in public.
Taken out of context.
Yeah. My art is no longer speaking to me. But I totally hear characters and their voices in my head. So like,
yeah. And it's like, and for the record, my art never tells me to harm any people or myself. So it is all just contained to this little creative world. So we're fine. But no, I mean, I feel like that's when the real magic happens. And that's when I am like the most excited about writing a story. It's the most joyful for me. It's flowing the best. It's when I honestly feel like I've tapped into something and I'm just like channeling it.
Yeah.
You know, the whole process can't be like that. So that's where I'm like, I know that's where the discipline factors in, because it's like, I know that I can't just like sit and wait for the inspiration to download into my head.
Mm-hmm.
There are the days where you do just have to like sit and crank, even if it sucks, like just you have something to work with. And when you look back, sometimes there are gems to be found in what you thought sucked too. Yeah. So it's not, there's nothing that really goes to waste, even if you end up like cutting stuff out. But in any case, I just feel like it's nice to leave yourself open and receptive to that. If the characters do start to become very real in your mind, if after, say, you've done a relationship reading for them with your tarot. So I don't know. I think if you like outline too specifically, too tightly, you're missing out on the magic then, because you might be presented with a door that opens, a fork in the road, and you might be tempted to go down the path that's kind of glittering in the distance. And you know, but if you had your outline that's like, well, no, I'm supposed to do this. I mean, it'd be the same thing as letting the tarot cards dictate what your reading is. You know, I don't think we should confine ourselves that way. We should like take that path and see where it leads.
Where it leads, yeah.
Even if it's a dead end and you have to go back and start over. I mean, it's worth exploring, and you probably have some insight from that process that you carry with you, and it enhances the other path that you originally sought to take. It's weird how that stuff can like layer in.
It's like just learning lessons. Like the wrong path can teach you as much as the right path does. And sometimes
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that didn't work, but
just like leaving yourself open with your story. I think doing it with the tarot is good too, where you don't have to have like a prescribed spread or feel like, you know, I'm saying I had used Anthony's story spread, but it's not like you have to use one that already exists. Like coming up with, that's the creative act of like coming up with one of your own, or just even on the fly, pulling the cards and just having the conversation with them. You might not know what your next question is, or if you even have one. It's just in response to what you pulled. When I pulled that card and it made me laugh, then in that moment, I thought of what my next question was. Then, you know,
that's like one of my favorite ways to work with tarot is just lay cards down and see what evolves out of that. What message. And then mixing different decks in, because then you get different flavors and different voices.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That'd be very cool, bringing them all in. Yeah. And I feel like that's a method I don't really use enough in my practice. Like for the creative work or otherwise.
I'm like envisioning this like, I don't know, spread or activity. Like if you're a writer, or particularly because it's character. So like if you had a deck for each of your main characters, and then you used those, and then, you know, had maybe another deck or oracle or something that like represented the story, the context of the story on the whole. And then like, I feel like there could be a lot you could gain out of that to really help you navigate this kind of web of intricacy that you have. Because story, when you're talking fiction, like you have characters, you have people in them, and that's a very different energy to work with than like nonfiction, where you're talking about a topic, right? You're not dealing with emotion. I mean, you can be dealing with emotional things, but you don't have these little beings running around in them, you know, putting their messy stuff all over everything, right?
Right.
So I feel like that would be really, really interesting. I might have to try that myself just to see how it comes out. But like, so have you ever picked a deck for like specific characters? I mean, I know you picked a deck for a story, but
I was just going to say, as you said that, I'm like, I never thought to do that, and I'm absolutely going to do
try
that because it was making me think of when I did the Scooby Decks tag and picked decks for Buffy characters.
Yeah, it's kind
and
of.
or she came back and did for the show Angel, and then that was so fun. And it's like that process was so much fun. Thinking of those characters and how they're reflected in the deck. So it's like having gone through that exercise, it didn't even dawn on me that I could do the same for my characters.
Yeah.
And I love that so much, Dawn. Thank you. And I know that you're you speak to that idea too of like kind of pulling the cards and letting that story develop in your book.
I do, yeah. Because you edited it for me. Oh my goodness. She was clubbing there. I mean,
congratulations on that, by the way. Speaking of nonfiction.
Thank you. That was such a fun project to work on together too.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
But for anybody who doesn't know, like Rumer is my editor. It's weird to have it out in the world, but that's a totally, like, writing nonfiction is such a totally different thing than writing fiction for me. Do you do any nonfiction writing, or do you stay mostly in the fiction realm?
I did like, blogging years ago for a local company when I first moved to London. I was writing on it was for a relocation agency, and I was writing on the expat experience. And then that led into writing web content for them as well. And, but that was a whole other animal too with the, with web content. And being beholden to SEO. And so I ended up like a different
animal.
Like when I had more artistic license, you could say, like I could pretty much just like write what I wanted as I felt inspired to, writing from my genuine experiences and things that I had learned. As that got more and more restricted with like keywords and this and that's going to play to the algorithm, then I just hated it. I pulled away, and that was the last time I really did do that. But that's like such a internet specific thing. I shouldn't say I've never thought about writing nonfiction. I guess I've asked myself if I were to, what I would write about. And I was just going to ask you. I think I would do it if I had a idea, but yeah, it would be interesting. Well, I was going to say, like, with the fiction, I can't compare because I haven't, written both, but I just know, and I don't know if you would agree, but like with fiction, it feels very, well, again, it depends on what nonfiction it is, right? I was gonna say fiction can be very vulnerable, but nonfiction can too, of course, especially if like
it can,
personal experience. And so
I mean, I definitely think, like, for me personally, like the nonfiction, like it's personal in that the stuff that I write about is sharing how I do things, how I go about things. I mean, that's like a lot of my content in general, membership, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of me, but like writing fiction is like under my skin me. It's like in the blood and the bone and the marrows. Whereas the nonfiction is more like, it's still me. It's still what I'm sharing. It's still what I do. But there is a sense, I think, of distance and sort of space between me and what I write, because I'm writing to teach versus writing to feel. And for me, fiction is all about feeling. Like if there's no feeling in the book, if there's no emotional tie, it doesn't have to be a romance. I mean, I do love romance, but there doesn't have to be a romance. There just has to be emotional current through the story that really is important to the story in whatever shape and form that is. And when you get to that level, for me, that's what feels really personal and vulnerable. And even though the nonfiction is still part of me, it's more of teaching rather than feeling it, which is how I kind of experience those things, which is probably why my fiction isn't out for the whole world to see.
Well,
I mean, maybe someday. I won't say never, but.
Well, what especially sucks about it when you do put something out there, then like anyone who knows you, they're like reading it and they're like, did that happen to you? Is that, you know what I mean? Like
it's not a one for one. It's like it's a metaphor.
Right. It's like you just want to say, like, well, I do have an imagination. Like there are things you just do create and fictionalized. But there is, like, speaking in metaphor, and there can be like that truth coming through, like capital T truth coming through in a modified scenario, but it can still harken back very much to lived experience. Because I think that's always important. And I feel like the more that I write fiction, the less autobiographical it's become. Because I feel like when I first started out, I was definitely drawing from personal experience, and I was not like, I don't think I was being metaphorical enough about it, which is probably why friends and family are always like, "Has your husband read that? Does he know?" I'm like, "Oh my god!" But I find I'm distancing more from that, like in my more recent stories, where I'm like, yeah, I'm not writing from my own life experience, but you kind of do have to pull from lived experience, though, to some extent. Even if I can't directly relate to a character and what their frame of reference is, you know, I'm doing my best I'm finding where the intersection could be that I can relate to them. So that authentic emotion and like responses to things and so forth can still come true in a true way.
I
was gonna say, I can't pretend that I know what it would be like being in that person's shoes, but I'm trying in my imagination to do the best I can.
Well, and there's got to be, I think, some nugget of realism in fiction. Otherwise, it wouldn't have any impact on us. Like, because we've all read books, watched movies, seen TV shows where there's zero sort of, there's no realness to it. You're looking at it going, nothing those people are doing feels authentic. Nothing those people are saying feels true. And you just, you know, that's what we consider usually a bad book, a bad movie. There's no connection. There's no reality. If you don't at least sort of anchor it in some sort of truth, no matter how widespread. I mean, like my fiction stuff it takes place on other worlds. I've never been to another world that I know of, right? I'm not a space traveler. I've never met aliens that I know of. I'm just going to say that. But, you know, so there's not truth in that, but the roots of it, there's truth in that. And I think that's important. I think that, I mean, not bring it back around to tarot, but that is the same as a tarot reading.
Yes. That's so true.
You have to have some sort of your own truth in that. Otherwise, it's not going to make a personal connection to you. I mean, I can tell you what the Four of Pentacles means in a standard way, but then if I try to make some sort of connection, I got to say what it means to me.
Right.
And, I mean, that changes moment to moment and depending on context and all that good stuff. But I think writing is very much in the same veins. Like there's got to be some truth to it. Otherwise, it's not believable or relatable in any stretch of the imagination.
Completely.
It's like that, like every character is a thread of you. It's not the whole of you. It's just one thread that comes out from you, and then it goes off into weave its own little thing, but it originates from inside you.
Yeah.
So I definitely see that in my characters, or I originate them in like fiction characters that I like know so well they could be real life to me.
And that, oh my gosh, those are the ones that always come across best on the page, because it's like it's hard for me to say in terms of like my own writing, because even though I edit, like I'm blind to my own fault. I do my best, but it's like I also have to have an editor. I have to have fresh eyes on my stories,
for sure.
Because I can't trust myself. I what's in my head, I can't know for sure if it's coming across on the page unless I get someone else's feedback. But when I'm editing for someone else, I mean, I've just seen like the range of, you know, those whose stories really pull me in, and those where it's like, okay, this is fun, you know, this will be like, it has its place, you know, it could be like a fun beach read, but you know, it's something that you can tell they're just kind of writing it to a formula, and like maybe they've got a series and they're trying to write a bunch of them at once, and whatever the case might be. So it's like I don't want to critique anyone's work, but the ones I find myself like experiencing as I'm reading them, I can just tell that writer feels like they know those characters.
It's like they live for you, with you. They're a part of you. I think.
For sure. And I think, and like you said, drawing the parallel with tarot, I mean, that's perfect, because that is like the difference between like, oh, just pulling out and going purely by what the guidebook is saying. I mean, great value in the guidebooks, of course. It's like you just went by that. and then you weren't bringing your own intuition to it or trying to connect the cards together in the ways that you see those patterns forming. I mean, that is so much bringing yourself to it. And I think also similarly, I mean, at least for me, like a reading can fall flat, just like writing can fall flat.
For sure.
If I'm just not in the right headspace, I can be looking like, well, of course I know what these cards mean traditionally, but like what it's meaning for me in this moment, not in the headspace for it. I got to leave it, walk away, come back to it another time. It's the same thing with the manuscript sometimes.
For sure.
I can't with this. Like, we're gonna part ways for a little bit.
I don't like you right now. We're gonna take a break.
Yes.
I do that. I do that with decks. I do that with projects I'm working on.
Yeah.
Videos I'm making, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's what's falling flat for me with the current manuscript that I'm working on. I am not feeling the emotion. I feel like this is probably the most I've ever tried to write a story from point A to point B, because I did spend more time trying to like map things out than I typically do. And things are just feeling kind of wooden as a result of that. So I feel like that's where I keep stopping and starting, because I'm trying to figure out how to infuse more of me and my heart into it. So I just don't have answers.
Yeah. I know, and you and I have talked about this like personally off camera and stuff, that like we both love those stories, those moments where it's like it's not about the big thing that's happening, it's about the little thing, and that is all hard. Like it's the interaction, the conversation, the whatever it is. Like I can write a whole scene that really nothing big happens, or like as I was when we were talking about the thing that I was writing, like there's this huge thing that's actually happening and this big world changing thing that's happening around them. But like, what am I focusing on? Their conversation in the kitchen, because that's where the heart is of the story is.
That's the bit the reader can relate to, you know, because I'm like, I'm not living this larger than life, you know, like my sphere is pretty small, and it's just like in the daily minutia of things that I mean, that's where I live literally. And I don't know, that's how it kind of comes across on the page too, just like those little moments and like connections between people. I love that. And I love that you love that too, because it's very hard to feel validated in that sometimes. You see what it seems like what gets rewarded more out there is the stuff that's like starting right away with like action and everything just moving, pacing really quickly. But I'm like, gosh, you know, some of the books that I loved most growing up, I don't know if they'd be published today if you put that standard for it, you know, like I still can nurture a slow burn.
That's kind of similar to like decks too, I think, because sometimes you have some decks are a slow burn. Like it's you know it's going to be worth it if you can just like get through that initial you know, awkward. It's like that awkward first date when you're like, man, I don't know. Like I've heard really good things about you, but I mean, I'm speaking as someone who hasn't dated in 28 years, but you know, I assume it's still sort of the same. You know, it's kind of that same. There's value in that, is what I'm trying to get at. There can be value, those, you know, if you just jump right into the sack with your characters, right? Your decks or whatever, like that's cool too.
Right. There's merit to the different approaches, but it's not to say there's not room for all.
Right. There is value in the slow burn, the stuff that takes a while to, and like in my experience, thinking about not only decks, books, relationships, whatever, the ones that I had to put the time and the effort in, those are the ones that are still around. A lot of those, like, well, we'll just talk about decks. I won't go into other topics, but so decks, there's decks that I'm just like, this is like, oh my goodness, this thing is going to rock my world and it's going to be the greatest thing ever. And there's so much expectation. And I'm like, bam, do the reading. It's great. It's wonderful. And I don't touch it for 8 months. That happens too. That happens with creative work for me too. But you know, relating it back to decks, sometimes that slow burn, that slow roll into a project, a story. It doesn't you know matter what you're talking about. I don't think. A reading, sometimes a reading's a slow burn. It takes a bit to figure out what's going on here?
Yeah.
What am I trying to, what's coming through this for me? So I think there's value in that. And it's really interesting talking about like books or movies or whatever, where it's like jump right in, right? We're like, yep, jumping right into this act. Like, let's do it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. Well, that's great for this 5 minutes, but what about, what's to follow? So
True. Because it was just making me think of like, I get so nervous when I do a reading on camera. Like if I'm like when I was doing the moon cycle spreads and I was just going ahead and doing the sample reading about me personally. But it's like, I feel so pressured like in that moment to just start like rattling off, and I'm just like talking. And maybe that does like, maybe it does allow ideas and insights to flow that way, that maybe if I sat and thought about it too much, it wouldn't come to me. But then there's also things like after the fact, I'm always like, well, I didn't even really like sit and look at it in terms of like, elementally, or are there things in the visuals that seem to be like, are there eye lines connecting and stuff like that? Like all those other like more intuitive things. I feel like you need more time and space to do that. And so I don't know if that's like totally equates to what you're describing, but just that sense of just kind of like jumping in and just kind of giving like the superficial reading of what those cards seem to mean. But it really is in those moments when you can just kind of sit and be okay that maybe something's not making sense right away, and just trust that there is rhyme and reason to it, and just nurture it. And I can see that too, going for like decks, like when there's a book that's like a bestseller and it's topping the reviews on Goodreads and people are reading it for book clubs and they're recommending it to you and everything. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean just because like everyone en masse is going gaga for something, it doesn't mean that I'm going to resonate with it, because sometimes I will. Sometimes I read something and I will love it, but then sometimes I'll read something and I'm just like, it's all right, like it's better than what I could do. Like I am allowed to be a reader too. I don't have to always look at everything through the writing lens. So I'm not comparing myself to that and saying I could do better. But like as a reader, I might be like, I mean, it was okay, but just because everyone's talking about it, and I feel like that happens with decks too sometimes, where there are the decks out there that everyone just goes gaga, and then I feel like there's something wrong with me when I'm using it and it's just not clicking, or if I'm expecting insta connection because someone else loved it so much for a particular reason. But then like you said, it could be something that given enough time and devotion. And I found I have had some decks that I've just kind of had to sit with and maybe not even use right away, but just kind of figure out how I want to use them, how I think they will be best used, and how I will resonate. Not using it just to use it.
Yeah.
Or like trying to find the way it'll best speak to me. And you have to nurture those relationships.
You do. Yeah. I've several decks that I'll get it in and I'm like, yep, this is cool, but it's not the time for it. So I've got it. And when the time comes for it, because I've learned not to rehome those decks because I just end up buying them back. Like that's a whole thing too. But I have several decks that I've rehomed in purge cycles, which I try not to do anymore. And then but the same thing could be, like you said, with the story or a creative project of any sort. Like sometimes you do kind of have to wait for that time and place, I think. And when it's wherever it is that inspiration or wherever it comes from, for individuals, like it's probably different for all of us. I have no idea where my inspiration comes from. It's just there sometimes, and sometimes it's not. So
I know. It's like if we knew where it came from, it'd be so easy to seek it out, and then there would be no problem with writer's block. But
we wouldn't have to do all these like elaborate rituals to try and coax it.
Yes,
like, please come talk to me.
Crystals, help me write my book. Can you just, if I set you on the keyboard, will you just like tap something out for me? Yeah, no, it's so true. I repurchased my first rehomed deck this year, and so I've definitely like learned the cautionary tale, and so things do stay in purgatory a long time. And then on the flip side of that, I recently rehomed one that I was trying so hard to bond with. This specific, what I'm thinking of specifically now is an oracle deck, but I know it's happened with tarot too, where I'm like, I want to make the effort. I've made videos about wanting to make the effort and like saying, well, I'm just going to pull it back out of purgatory and I'm going to work with it again. And then I finally just had to reach the conclusion, like, I don't think it should be this hard. Like, I get it. It doesn't have to like, you know, I don't have to kick it to the curb if it's not like instant connection. I do get that. But when you have put the work in, and something's still not there. So I'm just making this connection in my brain now that that's kind of what my manuscript right now is feeling like. Like, I forcing it because I was so in love with the idea of it.
Yeah. I think also too, sometimes we outgrow ideas, we outgrow things, or it's like that, what do they say, the reason, the season, and the lifetime thing. Like I found for me that there are definitely, not just writing projects, but just projects, other creative stuff in general. Decks can be the same. They're there for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. Not all of them are meant to be there forever, and not all of them are meant to come to this full fruition, or you know, like develop this. Like, I mean, I wrote a whole book on bonding with your tarot, but not every deck is meant to be bonded with, right? I'm not bonded to every deck. I'm bonded to maybe a dozen or so decks in my whole entire collection, and I have hundreds. There are, you know, maybe I could go up as far as like, I don't know, 20, 25, whatever. And most of the decks that I am bonded to are decks that I've had for a long time, and they're not the latest, greatest fad thing. They're the ones that are tried and true in my collection that just never let me down. Yeah. I feel like sometimes creative projects are that way too. It's the ones that I can keep coming back to, and there's always something there. It may be just a little flicker of a flame, but it's there. You can nurture it if you really wanted to. But then there are other projects where I'm like, man, that thing is cold. There's nothing. I feel nothing. It's done. Like, it's just time to bury it and move on, which is really hard to do when you've invested a lot of time and energy into something.
Yeah, it is. I feel like that's part of a big reason why I will resist and be like, no, I'm going to make this work. But it's just,
I think sometimes we get that with decks too, because I know I've done it horribly, like a really expensive indie deck or something. And I'm like, but I paid a lot of money for it. Like, I've got a financial investment in it, but it's just not working for me.
Yeah.
I will sometimes hold on to it longer than I probably should have. And I will try to force that relationship because there is this investment that I feel like I've made in it. And the same, whether it's time, money, whatever it is, like it's all an energetic investment of some sort. And when that gets high, really, really high, whether it's in terms of, you know, you've spent a buttload on this deck, or you've invested 8 months of your life into writing this manuscript, and you're just like, it's not working. That's such the hardest thing, to acknowledge that and then to like put it away. Like, it's such a hard thing. Because I feel like, unlike a deck, writing is kind of like a part of you. So it's like you're almost like putting away this part of you that you've, you know, invested all of this
creation. It definitely is like a bit of your soul. even when it's falling flat. Like,
I mean, I know like there's writing advice of like, don't get that attached to your babies, right? Don't be afraid to kill your darlings.
Yeah, right. Yes, kill your darlings.
Kill your darlings, yeah.
Yes.
But man, that is easier said than done.
It is, because they also say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is like cautioning on like, don't hang out too much, like keep some of that in there. And so, yeah, I know that's where it's easier for me to edit for someone else, because I have less attachment to the story. I can do that for someone else. Me? No.
So do you have any advice for anybody who maybe is looking to incorporate tarot into either writing or just any sort of creative? I mean, we've talked a lot about writing, but I think everything we've talked about transfers to any sort of creative project or even work stuff, any sort of thing you're trying to, I think, bring into the world in some sort of sense.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for somebody who maybe might be looking to start incorporating tarot into that?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess because I feel it's worked for me, because it's not like maybe they are in more abundance out there than I've even found. Because I was going to say, like, starting with the spread, like having something that like had existed like that and kind of launching off of that was useful. And having done that in practice, now I feel like more comfortable with maybe designing something of my own, or again, kind of like letting go of that structure and just doing it more conversationally and card by card and letting the questions arise from there. So it's really difficult. I don't have like a solid piece of advice I feel like I can go to, just because I guess I feel like the process almost has to be as creative as your creative process and kind of like
more organic.
Yeah. Where, you know, we talked about our projects and kind of going to what's calling you. It's kind of like going to what's calling you in that moment. So, you know, like I couldn't recommend a specific deck to use. I feel like it's something like letting that project dictate it. But even what you're wanting to ask the cards in that moment. But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still talking about it in terms of writing, I guess.
Oh, I mean, that's
I'm not
fine.
even really giving an answer.
I think it applies. And kind of what I'm getting out of that is like, don't be too prescriptive with it. Like, same as like, you know, I think we would say with like reading tarot, right? You gotta leave space for yourself. You gotta leave space for your intuitive hits to come through. And
like, right. If you do find an existing spread out there someone else has come up with, by all means try it out, because that's a nice kind of starter kit there.
At one point,
And I also think, actually, one thing of advice, I think I got so into tarot because I was sort of drying up with writing and maybe feeling like I was struggling to get the creativity flowing and feel intuitive. And I really turned to tarot as a tool for helping enhance my intuition and creativity and storytelling ability. Because anytime you do a reading,
you're telling
a spread for any question, barring creative work, I mean, anything, you are weaving that narrative there. And so I feel like that does help like oil those skills and kind of, so I feel less guilty is I guess what I'm saying. Like if I'm not writing, I feel like in doing the tarot, I am still tending to my creative well and filling it in that way. And I just feel like anything like that's an investment in your creative project. It's just like if you're going to write a book, you read a book. Don't feel guilty that you're reading and not writing. Reading is an investment. And watching TV and seeing storytelling there is an investment in what you're writing. And so I feel like in the same way, the tarot is too. Even if you are just doing readings for like your day-to-day and asking, you know, the real life questions, not the fictional stuff. I think it just helps like keep that muscle toned.
Practice. It's good practice. Yeah.
And just kind of celebrate the creativity that's inherent and the story that's inherent in tarot itself. It's cool.
Tarot's cool.
Tarot's awesome.
We kind of love tarot around here.
Tarot's tops.
If you like tarot, you can be friends with us too. You can sit at our table. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. I knew there wouldn't be an issue of what we were going to talk about.
Yeah, seems to never be a problem, which is great.
Pretty much the same conversations we have off camera. We're just having it on camera now.
Exactly.
But anyway, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me and being a part of my new Cards and Company series. It's so fun.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I mean, honestly, this was a blast. Very honored. It's
always so fun. I always enjoy hanging out with you. Either way, on camera, off camera, whatever. It's all good. So for anybody else watching too, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I will definitely be leaving links for Rumer's channel. Got to go check out her funny and creative content. You are so freaking funny. I just got to say that. Like, I don't feel like I've said that yet, but you make me laugh all the time. It's fantastic. And
feel free to laugh at me.
No, it's never laughing at you. It's laughing with you, which is amazing. So yeah, definitely go check out our channel, do all the subscribe, likes, all that good stuff so you can follow along with Rumer's journey. I'm sure you'll be back at some point to hang out with me too. So
I hope so. I would love to.
Yeah. So thank you so much.